Okay, thank you for attending the CFC First Wednesday webinar. We have Bob Sawhill presenting Get the Green Light to Go Greener. Bob Sawhill, CFM, has provided facility management, project and program management, strategic facility planning, and industrial engineering expertise to large corporations for more than 30 years. His extensive knowledge and experience in workplace technology, software product strategy, application development, and integrated workplace management systems implementation enables him to create technology-enhanced solutions that work. He has been employed by many technology-savvy companies, including Hewlett-Packard, Lockheed Martin, Tektronix, Tririga, USAA, and currently eBusiness Strategies. Bob has served as an instructor at California State University, is a frequent conference presenter, and an expert advisor with Oscar's industry standards. Active in IFMA for 22 years, he is a certified facility manager, past president, and Information Technology Council member. So Bob, I'd like to hand it off to you.
Thanks, Joshua and Vanessa, for the introductions, and thank you all for inviting me to share some of my learnings over the past years with you this morning. And so basically, when I've looked at educational sessions such as this, I often refer to IFMA's report on the top 10 current trends and future outlooks. And I found this as good as guiding what is important, what is relevant to the facility management profession. And obviously with the title of today's topic, I'll be touching a lot on sustainability. And what we've seen over the years is its importance has risen to the top of the list in the most recent report. But it's not all about sustainability. We really need to be managing these other top 10 items as we approve projects or apply our resources to it, and we're really looking for the synergies of sustainability. So a lot of what I'll be touching on is focused on sustainability, but it's also touching on many of the areas in this top 10. So what's the objectives of today's session? Basically, what I'll be covering today is kind of first key areas in measurement and management. So we're really looking at what can we do as far as just measuring where we're at in the sustainability information. Some of this can be overwhelming. And this is often a first step in a struggle for many companies. So really, the cliche, you can't manage what you can't measure, and so we'll be looking into that. Next kind of key area that I want to get into is really assessing your environmental opportunities and looking at some techniques and methodologies around that. And what's key here is optimizing your scarce resources and delivering the best sustainability solutions. So in order to get greener, we need to be looking at the best solution, not just any solution. And basically, we are also competing with other projects that are within the facility management realm. So to get that green light, we really need to justify these programs and projects. And then as we go through the session, I want to sprinkle in some case study examples just to illustrate how you can put these best practices into play. So what's the problem, or what are we faced with here? If you've been to many sustainability presentations and seen figures of this nature, but obviously the buildings are the largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, and the energy consumption, electrical consumption is significant. And so the buildings are the problem when it comes to sustainability, and guess what? As facility managers, we own this and we're responsible for that. So it is really a key area to tackle. If saving the planet and environmental sustainability isn't enough motivation for you, then the buildings or the facilities are 30% of the overall enterprise spend for most corporations. So from a financial perspective, you should be paying attention to these and looking at it from a financial payback. So what are our challenges, some of the pain points that occur in the sustainability realm? Like a lot of other facility management areas, there's just a lot of data to sort through, a lot of forms to fill out, a lot of information to keep track of. Where are we at collecting the information or getting our certifications and so forth? And it can be information overload or trying to find the correct data. And this constant juggling act and balancing act of all the other priorities in the organization. And we're trying to do all this with the lack of resources. We're trying to bridge process silos. We're working cross-functionally. And we're trying to do all this with information scattered in several disparate systems, and it just really makes it challenging. So what we want to look at today are what are some of the solutions around these problems and pain points, and how can we streamline things or get the information adequately. So the key areas I'm going to touch on, this is basically our agenda for the day, is the first key area is measure and manage. So really want to look at kind of the foundation of all this is getting the information that we need for basic corporate reporting or reporting in general and benchmarking, and how do we go about that data collection, getting the right data, and how do we streamline that. And then looking at kind of the methodology or how we might go about performance management in order to really manage to the key objectives or key metrics and understand the performance of our organization and our sustainability operations. The next area I'll be talking about is optimizing opportunities, and this is really the key to the title of the presentation. It's about getting the green light to go ahead with your projects and programs, but it's also about the best projects or the best solutions in environmental sustainability and getting going beyond green to get greener. And so what I'll talk about in that segment is really looking at how do we identify the opportunities, how do we analyze and assess those particular opportunities, and using a methodology that goes beyond project management, portfolio project management, that is how we prioritize and focus our resources on the right projects. The last segment is I'll be covering will be integrated solutions, and I'll be touching on kind of how we're going to take it to the next level, or what is the future next generation that is already occurring, and looking at how we can go beyond this and what are some of the leading practices there. So with that, I'll jump right into the first segment on measure and manage, and touch on kind of some of the key areas here. So first, often it's a daunting task we're faced with, where do I start, and what data is needed. And so often a guiding principle that I go by in implementations and projects is really begin with the end in mind. And we really want to look at what are the outputs, what is the valuable data, or what's important to measure. And then based on those outputs, we determine what inputs are needed. In determining that, we also need to look at how do we normalize the data for comparisons. How can we do apples and apples comparison, whether it be for benchmarking internally, externally, or just getting data that is useful and we can detect issues and problems. We need to keep in mind those industry standards and protocols that are applicable, and we need to apply those in appropriate areas. And what's very important is how do we transform this data into actionable insights. It doesn't do any good to collect a bunch of data or display a bunch of information. It just becomes gee whiz information, or feeding the monster as far as getting data out, in and out. But unless you format it or present it in a way that it's going to drive action, it's really not of any value, or a lot of work that is not getting you the benefits of that information. And last, really want to drive data-driven decisions. We want to really base these on the facts and the appropriate criteria to make decisions. Too often, getting projects and programs launched, it's about the politics or lobbying to get your project, whoever's allowed us, or decibel-driven decisions. And so really want to drive this to fact-based decisions, and we need the data in order to do that. When I was at Hewlett-Packard in facility management, what really pulled us into collecting environmental data was corporate social responsibility reporting. And basically, this was important for the corporation, over a decade ago, to get the environmental data, and that was really what drove collecting this data internationally for hundreds of facilities and making sure it was accurate to present to the public on the corporate website. And so this was a huge effort of collecting data in spreadsheets across the globe, and then consolidating spreadsheets and extracting this data. And we basically eventually it became overwhelming for the spreadsheet, and had to go to an an internally developed system to collect that data and report that data. But this is really what initially drove us. Obviously, that data can be used for other purposes, for managing your facilities and so forth. But this was really an area that kind of first pulled us into the data collection reporting aspect. In doing reporting of that nature, you need to keep in mind, particularly with greenhouse gas emissions reporting, that there are protocols to follow, and you need to understand those definitions. I'm not going to get into the details of the greenhouse gas protocol. There's good references on that, or sessions that will cover that in more depth. But it's important to know this standardization and where and what portions of that data are you responsible for in facility management. So this is the key into some of that reporting. And naturally, green building certification is a big part of this information collection. And the IFMA Foundation has put out a series of how-to guides on sustainability, and one of those is the green building rating systems. And so this is a good reference. That then some of our experiences, we were working with U.S. headquartered systems, so as obvious that LEED was typically the certification that was the certification of choice, and sometimes that was mandated as a global standard, but often we had needed to provide the flexibility from a data collection standpoint in the other regions of the world to adopt some of the leading certifications such as BREEAM, Green Globes, or Green Star. So this is an important part of the data collection and organization, of course. And then Energy Star is additionally important, and this is helpful in understanding where you stand relative to other buildings and getting good insights into where you stack up as far as energy use. And so there's a lot of effort here in collecting the data to feed into Energy Star, and then you need to utilize that data that you get back from Energy Star for some of your operations. So in a large corporation, this is a lot of data to manage, and important that you have the capabilities to manage a large portfolio. From a benchmarking perspective, this is really where the normalizing of data comes in. And there's various standards out there you can use as references, but it's important to understand that when you're doing some of these comparisons or looking at reports in various ways, there's various parameters or attributes you need to be aware of, or aggregate the data in a certain way that you can account for climate variations, such as azure degree heat cool days. And so this is where you can normalize data between different regions from climate difference, or really understand the difference. Is my energy consumption up this year because we had an unusually hot summer compared to last year, or is it something wrong with the energy consumption in general? And naturally, you need to organize this data by geographic regions, building types, industry type, and align the periods at which you collect the data, and can normalize it based on time periods. There was an interesting study or survey done by IBM a few years ago, and John Clark presented this at World Workplace a couple of years ago. And I'm just really highlighting one of the slides as we get into some of the information here of where you might focus some of our efforts. Some of the information that came back in this particular survey was about really where the companies are investing in their green initiatives. And what really highlighting here is the top three, and really the obvious one at the top is improving energy efficiency. This is really where we're going to gain the most financial return, as well as the best place to really put efforts from an environmental sustainability perspective. The second item is really the low-hanging fruit. By just doing better maintenance, doing our preventive maintenance procedures and the appropriate servicing of our equipment, we can gain something. So this is an area where it's easy to get going, and the investment's usually low, and the low-hanging fruit of the quick win. The third item is not so obvious or not discussed a lot, and I'm glad to see that it did make the top few in the survey, and that's really around space utilization. And it's important to look at it from this perspective. because you can put a lot of effort into building a LEED Platinum building, and that's great. Kudos to you. But if that building's half full, then you're burning twice the amount of energy that you need to because you have an oversized building, or you didn't manage your utilization well. And so the greenest building is not the Platinum building. It's the building you didn't build because you utilize the space you have better. And so this is really important, and looking at your information, your metrics, you need to take into account metrics that include the utilization and how well you're using the building, as well as how efficient the building is. Interestingly, towards the bottom of the list, kind of what is not making the top of the list is things such as the green tracking and managing the greenhouse gas emissions. It may be something you need to do from a standpoint of corporate reporting, but it's not necessarily going to drive the improvements and all that. It's really what's going to fall out. If you do the top three, the natural fallout is that your greenhouse gas emissions will be reduced. So from a data collection standpoint, there's kind of touching on these previous segments, there's a lot of information to collect and a lot to consider from the standpoint of where are the data sources and where do we get the information, but then, looking at it from the standpoint of the right data and is it accurate and how do you gather it. And this can be a large task. I was saying in our experience at Hewlett-Packard, we were really kind of outgrew the spreadsheet and really need to look at other ways to streamline that information. And so really what I want to look at now is a case study, kind of example of this. And from this I'm taking the project we did for a large oil and gas company. In this particular case, we were implementing the IBM Trariga integrated workplace management system and the module they have around environmental sustainability. And so this slide is kind of summarizing some of the scope we had on that project. But some of the approaches that we took on this particular project was we really start from a process perspective. And it really what's important is the process is going to drive what we need to do, and the technology enables it. And so we looked at the overall environmental sustainability at a high level. What are the kind of the key process areas and how they tie together? And then we would drill into a process. In this example, we're going to be looking at the collecting of the environmental sustainability information. So if we drill into that particular sub-process, we would detail that out further. And in this particular case, and using this particular software, kind of the key is that we are populating various logs such as an energy log, carbon log, water log, etc. And this is going to be driving some of the greenhouse gas emission, but more importantly, it's really looking at our consumption and data about our buildings and our portfolio. A lot of that data was inputted, through kind of traditional invoicing, looking at our utility billings and so forth, and getting that information put in the system. That might be done individually at a site level by the appropriate facilities personnel, or it may be done through a service. Often large corporations are outsourcing the payment of the utility bill, the auditing of the bills, and so often what we see is these outsourced service providers would then capture that utility information, and were really the source of inputting that information. In this particular project, what we're looking at is a future to design considerations. We really want to, where possible, tie into sub-meters or building automation systems. And so rather going through a data collection process, go through an integrated feed of the information. But often the buildings didn't have that, but in the cases where we could tie into that is really what we want to look to, is getting a direct tie into that information. So an example of what I was talking about feeding that information in is basically we're taking a spreadsheet form where we would put the information in, and then basically this spreadsheet was something that's simple, intuitive, that people are used to, could fill the data in, and then basically they email the spreadsheet into the system, and it's automatically populated into the system. And they don't have to be log into a system or be trained on using an IWMS system, and so this was easy to deploy, particularly when you're outsourcing these services and looking for an external supplier to submit this data. In this particular case study, we also looked at managing the green building certifications, and this is another example. We got into the process and looked at how this client would be using the system, kind of what would be the future state of that. And what we really discovered is we started looking at it from a process perspective and not from what the software does. Really discovered there was gaps in the software, that it was not really handling the managed part of certification. It was, you could collect the data and report the data, but it wasn't helping you manage LEED certification and where you stand on how complete you are, or what's left to do, or what's the status, or what's the cost. And so we were quickly became aware, looking at it from a process perspective, there was gaps that needed to be filled. And so what we looked at is modifying some of the forms and the information in the system, and kind of basically added some data. And this mock-up in our design is we looked at adding information tabs where we could look at where is the status of the prerequisites and the credits or the checklist, and basically we'd categorize, we'd break it down in the categories, but then we would look at what is ready to submit, and what is on track to complete, and then areas where we're not on track, but there's also some points that we decide may not pursue, and so we'd also characterize what we're not going to do. And so basically, as you're driving this to completion, looking at the status, you want this report to eventually be either gray or blue bars to signify that we are complete with gathering the information to go forward for LEED certification. So this kind of gave some insights, or ability to look at kind of where we stand on, in a sense, the project of getting the LEED certification. Part of that is we just really look at the LEED points and then gathering that where the stats on that, but we were also looking at from a cost perspective, what were the internal costs to get to that state, or what would be some external costs of some improvements we might need to do to the facility in order to gain those points. And so from that we could look at metrics, what is the cost per point, so to speak, and look at information from that perspective. And then basically we also just streamlined from the standpoint of data entry screens that were improving it over the base product. So with that, it gave us a lot of information. We could look across the portfolio and see where we stand on certifications, and, on multiple buildings, and then also slice and dice the information by regions or particular campuses and so forth. And then again, look at the status not only at a building level or a particular LEED certification level, but look at it across multiple buildings. And so this kind of added the capability of managing the overall process of managing your LEED certifications, as well as collecting the data on the certifications that you could use across a large corporation. So next what I'd like to get into is performance management. And basically this is a methodology that you can apply across your corporation, across facility management, as well as for environmental sustainability. And so some keys to performance management is aligning to corporate objectives. And so it's looking at it from the corporate level, your facility management or corporate real estate organizational level, and all the way down to the individual and how they contribute to this overall performance. And again, there's overwhelming data here, and how do we analyze that? And then looking at it from the perspective of how we manage performance based on that. So basically, workplace performance management or corporate performance management is methodology that's been out there for years. It's often tied to continuous improvement type programs that plan, do, check, act. And basically this slide we're depicting this cyclical process. We're really starting with aligning the workplace strategies to the corporation, setting the appropriate objectives. What are the targets that we want to achieve? What is a good performing building or a poor performing building? And then we want to manage that by looking at the operations and the information, but out of the the system, we're going to get reports, alerts, or something that's going to help us detect issues. And then based on these, we want to analyze this performance and pinpoint some of the issues or areas that could use improvement. And we can use that to prioritize some improvements. What are the areas that need the most attention, or where should we apply our resources? And then based on that information, we can act upon that, and we can improve our operations. We can remedy a problem quickly or something that's out of spec. And then through this continuous improvement, we can really look at how can we optimize goals or realign and kind of repeat the cycle. So that's really what performance management is all about. And as we look at some of the data, this is graph here. I mean, this chart is a bit of an eye chart, but really what I want to illustrate here is what's key is when you're looking at your metrics or your goals that you're going to be measuring, you really need to tie it to the corporate objectives and really understand what you're doing. How does that either contribute to profitability and revenue growth, or bottom line from an expense standpoint. But I think more importantly than looking at just from an expense that's a necessary evil, we really need to position facilities as how do we contribute to revenue growth, and how do we contribute to that new business line or business growth. And so a lot of times positioning the metrics and the information based on that is key. So an example of how we might look at some metrics and how we might organize this. In this particular example, I'm looking at it from this perspective. We want to look at a high-level metric that is for the workplace executive, and they want to cascade those down to the middle management and to the individual contributors. So at a high level, or corporate level, you may choose a metric such as the energy intensity per occupant. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's not only that you want to look at the efficiency of the building, but you want to look at the efficiency of your occupancy. So this metric takes into account both. As we apply metrics for some of the middle management, if you're in the building operations or maintenance management area, the area that you can impact change on is really the building efficiency. And so the metric you may be measured on is energy intensity per area. And so we can really look at the performance of the building in this case. The space planner or space management team may be looking at area of occupant, because this is where they can affect change, or where their area of responsibility. And so by driving better occupancy and building efficiency, we can drive this higher level metric of energy intensity per occupant. And then looking at how we may drill down into detail and have further analysis metrics. In the case of the occupancy, we may be looking at other metrics such as just overall occupancy vacancy, or looking at seating densities. There's something we can do to increase or decrease the density of the seating. And then also from a mobility program standpoint, look at sharing ratios and so forth, and look at some of the opportunities or where we stand based on our targets. And so this is depicting really how we would cascade down metrics or roll up metrics into some high-level metrics. And then, of course, in measuring these metrics, we need to be able to roll up or drill down the information. We need to slice and dice it across various dimensions. So we need to be able to look at it by geography, or look at it by sites and campuses, or look at it by alike building types, or maybe want to compare lease versus own, and look at time trends and so forth. So we need to aggregate this data in a way that we can look at the details and roll it up to a global level. Another aspect of performance management is the balanced scorecard. And we often see this in corporations, and that's often applied to facility management organizations. In this slide, I'm just really looking at how you might categorize the scorecards, either something at a corporate level that's you're aligning to, or creating balanced scorecard categories that are applicable to facilities management. The key here is that we need to balance these metrics and not just tie everything to financial metrics or tie everything to environmental. We need to look at all the aspects. In the case study I was talking about earlier, we were looking at performance management for this situation here. And in this particular software, there was a multitude of metrics that are available out of the box or that could be created. And in this particular case, for this particular client, kind of what we really narrowed it down to is from a performance standpoint, the key performance indicators we narrowed down was these 5 here, and from their perspective, they were the most important. They kind of looked at different areas such as energy consumption and water use and solid waste recovery and so forth. And so this kind of really gave a high-level picture was there, and the key is you want to narrow it down to the top few. Having numerous key performance indicators is not a good practice. You really want to narrow it down to the top few. And if we were looking at the previous slide, some of the other balanced scorecard categories, we may be looking at some of the customer satisfaction, some of the others too that we would roll up to that high level. And then some of the analysis metrics that we provided is kind of listed here that when we look at that key performance indicator and something's not looking right or something is underperforming, then we had the other metrics that we could use to help pinpoint, where the problem was, or get into a little more detail that might help us detect what some of the issues are, or where should we go out and do an assessment and get more information. So looking at it from a technology perspective of delivering on that workplace performance management, these examples are really showing getting in the system and logging in this particular case as an executive. So this is where we can orient the scorecard to the person that's logging in and their role, and the level that I was showing in the graphic before that they would be looking at what's applicable to that individual. And so basically the scorecard is presented as also a navigation pane. And so basically I can click on customer satisfaction. I see that we're underperforming here. And as I click on that scorecard, then I can go through an analysis aspect, and I can start looking at this from different perspectives as far as time trends, or view it by location, and then I can slice and dice that information to really get down to particular attributes. And then by seeing this red bar, we're seeing that is underperforming. We've got some marginal time periods as well. So we can start looking at these time periods and what happened and drill into reports to get further details. So by doing this analysis, we can start to pinpoint issues or identify opportunities. So next I want to get into the segment around optimizing opportunities, and this is really a key part of this overall presentation. And again, I'll be getting into kind of methodology about portfolio project management, and part of that is really identifying the opportunities and then analyzing and assessing these opportunities. So portfolio project management, this graph is kind of depicting how it ties together the business cycle or the business goals, as well as traditional project management on the right and the cycles on that. And basically, in portfolio project management, we're really looking at this at a higher strategic level from the standpoint of we got programs comprised of projects, and we got a portfolio of projects. So we want to look across this portfolio of projects, and we really want to align this portfolio to the business strategies. And so a lot of that is this portfolio optimization is going to be about choosing the right projects to go forward with. And then as we get into the project management, we really want to be managing the performance of those projects. Are we delivering on the benefits that were promised in those projects? And as we go through stages or phases in the project and go through stage gates and make decisions about these phases that we go forward or not, this is an opportunity from based on that. We may look at portfolio realignment. Maybe we need to refocus this project. Maybe we need to rethink the direction on this because it's not going to deliver the benefits originally, or how do we correct it or get it on track, or do we cancel this and reapply the resources to projects that will get us further benefits. So an example here is from the standpoint of corporation, we may be setting goals and objectives and strategies, and based on those strategies, there's a number of projects that we can undertake to achieve these goals. And some of those goals may be environmental, they may be basically building deficiencies or deferred maintenance that we need to correct, and so there's a number of projects that might be environmental sustainability projects or other facilities projects. And basically, that's typically going to be more projects than you have the resources or funding to do, so we need to go through a prioritization process, and we need to look at criteria that is really going to evaluate whether how it fits corporate strategies from a financial perspective, and really what is the overall capacity of our resources that we can do. And so basically this project planning or project pipeline is really where we want to do the analysis and pick the right project to go forward. So when you're looking at getting the green light to go, you need to understand this criteria, you understand what it's going to take to get the approval on this, and you want to look at projects that are the best projects that are the highest value so that we can apply those resources to that. So an example, again, come back to this case studies, is again we can use the workplace performance management I was talking about, that we can look at the information in different ways, and we start pinpointing buildings that are an issue that might cause us to do an assessment or inspection of that, or drill into more information and determine what are some opportunity areas that we ought to put forward as a project. And in identifying these opportunities, as I was saying earlier, it may be deferred maintenance type issues, it may be environmental assessment that you would do, or maybe come from day-to-day inspections, or just, out in the field discovering issues as we're doing preventive maintenance procedures. And then, of course, is the capital project plan. So we really need to put all these various projects through the funnel of selecting projects. So in looking at the opportunities, in this particular case, we were really looking at the data that is the obvious would be the financial, rate of return, payback, and so forth, but also looking at it from the standpoint of how will this improve our Energy Star rating, or how are these needed points to get the LEED certification, and so looking at the data from those perspectives. With that, we're able to do side-by-side comparisons of the different projects and really look at what are the best projects to choose. We can also then analyze the information in a bubble chart type diagram, where we can look at the information, kind of look at what are the better projects, and to kind of better describe this bubble chart, a way to look at the information on a two-dimensional matrix of this nature is one dimension being business value. What are the benefits of this to the business on this? And obviously we wanted to be doing the highest value, but also look at it from the standpoint of the ability to execute or risk. We may have some projects that the ability or the risk to getting to that true benefit or doing it on time or on budget may be risky. And so if we look at it in that perspective, what we really want to do is fund the projects or go forward with the projects that are in this upper quadrant where it's a high value and low risk. Some of the other areas, they may be marginal, and we may want to postpone those or retarget, but what we want to do is mitigate the risk, and we want to focus the scope and really drive the projects into that upper quadrant. So it might be something to kind of rethink it. If we fall in this bottom quadrant, we probably shouldn't do it at all, and we should drop it from the list or totally rethink it and get it into that upper quadrant and not invest in there or take funding and resources away from the high-value projects. So kind of a simpler example of how we did this in this particular case study is we created a report basically from a LEED certification standpoint. It was looking at the various prerequisite and credits to get the LEED certification, and based on what I was showing you earlier, we're quantifying the cost for each of those points. We could look at it from the standpoint, what is the cost per point, and then sort it based on that, and then have some cumulative totals. Then we could start looking at where do we draw the line, or which projects we're going to do or not do. In this example here, this green line is drawn, and we're going to do everything above the line so that we can get to the 60 points for gold certification. But when we see below the line, it's really too expensive to get to platinum, so we may decide gold is sufficient. In another case, we might decide that this building is just too expensive to get certified. Let's invest the funds in other buildings, or get another building from gold to platinum. And so this is really how we could prioritize the projects and achieve the LEED certification. Now, we may look at some of these below-the-line projects that maybe they're not as important from a LEED certification standpoint. They still may have the financial payback, and they still may be worthy projects to go forward with from that aspect. But this gave us the ability to look at how can we prioritize projects, where's the best place to invest the funds. So next I want to get into a segment here of integrated solutions and go through this section fairly quickly because it's really painting the picture of the future. And so basically when we're looking at integrated solutions, we're not just talking about the technology being integrated. We're really looking at this. You need to look at it from the perspective of people, process, and technology. And so integrated workplace management systems is kind of a key area where we can get a lot of this information, but we need to look at it from a process perspective and the people that interact with it. And so some of what we did in those case studies is I was showing you a lot of the information about LEED certification or sustainability projects and so forth, but also some of the day-to-day operations. We really made sure that when we're looking at preventive maintenance or maintenance procedures, we were really thinking from the standpoint, what are the types of things that we need to get into there for environmental sustainability practices. So is getting the right information or getting the right preventive maintenance procedures, make sure that we got those into the system. And then other aspects is condition assessment. Typically, we're looking at it from the standpoint of deferred maintenance and deficiencies, but we can also look at it from the standpoint what are opportunities to be gained from the standpoint of any assessments that might be done from energy perspective or environmental perspective. I talked earlier about the project manager and the portfolio manager looking to make sure that we're putting those processes and methodologies into play. There's a real estate aspect of it. And then strategic facility planning was another aspect. How do we optimize the space utilization and kind of have that go forward look? And so in the strategic facility planning, really what we're doing is really looking at what is the demand of the business units in the future and what is the supply of buildings and space that we will have based on lease terms and our master plan, and really look at how we can improve utilization in the future, or do we need to build new buildings to accommodate the growth. And in doing the analysis of various scenarios and look at the what ifs, we can be looking at some of the occupancy type data and the cost type data, but also put in there some environmental metrics to see how it might impact metrics such as carbon footprint or energy use and so forth. So now looking kind of at a higher level vision, and what I'm depicting here is the high performance workplace. We've talked a lot about sustainable facilities in this presentation, really the information we need to look at from the standpoint of the contributors to that. So we're not just delivering buildings, facilities, we're delivering sustainable facilities. But those facilities, we need to, most importantly, look at the workforce that they house. And so we need to contribute to that engaged workforce in those facilities and enable them to get their business done, whether it is inside the building or outside the building in a remote location. And some of what's in here is that the technology enablers, we need to look at some of the business systems that impact the business or provide them with the technology to enable their business process. We also need to look at it from the standpoint of how do we manage facilities and the facility management processes. Another area is this intelligent infrastructure. Basically the technology is really changing the way we do things. Now we're seeing emerging smart devices and using those to access information more. But we're also looking at smart or intelligent buildings that is really coming to the forefront in recent years and getting traction. And this is really taken to the next level. But we're really seeing the connectivity in anywhere computing. So this enables the workforce, but we need to look at that workplace as really the connectivity as well as the physical space. Drilling into kind of the intelligent building and the smart building aspect of that is now with the technology available, we're really looking at everything converged on the internet, that our building systems, our energy management system, HVAC, lighting, and so forth are now becoming connected and data readily available. And so we really need to look at this as an integrated solution of building systems and access to that data and further automating things. But on the right side, we need to look at from that connectivity aspect and the services we provide or the workplace we provide for the businesses. And so what's really important is the overall connectivity and that being converged over the internet and IP telephony and so forth. And then how we are using smart devices, smart phones in our business operations, in our buildings, or wherever we may be doing work. And so this is really helping with mobility solutions and the fact that the workforce is more mobile now and some of the solutions in the facility. When we look at smart buildings, are often termed intelligent buildings. Some of what we're seeing is that building network is really considered the fourth utility. So having that IT infrastructure is really your foundation in this, but as well that we have now connected components. We're starting to see smart assets that are the use of RFID and things like that, that now that these assets contain information or can give you information automatically, and various sensors and meters that are wired and wireless and give us a lot more capability of collecting data. And then the most important aspect of this is the information out of that. This is where we can do quite a bit. What we're really seeing in recent years is really skipping some of the issues or the challenges they have with disparate proprietary systems and building automation systems and the difficulty getting that data, but kind of really going right to the components and getting the data. I had the pleasure of visiting Microsoft's facilities in Redmond. They just, if you look, there's a lot of white papers out there, and they're really doing a superb job of utilizing the technology in intelligent buildings, and they're really looking at the millions of data points, per time period, and synthesizing that data into, what are issues to look at, and what are the priorities of that, and where can they have the most impact with their resources, and apply them to something that's going to save the most money or maintain the comfort of the occupants in that building. So they are making real-time decisions or detecting issues they would never have seen through walkthroughs or inspections or retro-commissioning or any of that. And so they're using a continuous commissioning process rather than retro-commissioning. They're really fixing and correcting things real-time rather than once every few years. And so lots of potential here and kind of really the future of this. I gave a presentation on intelligent buildings to the Houston chapter, and this is a big topic in its own. So in summary, where do you stand? How do you measure up? Are you able to measure where you are? Are you able to collect the data? Do you know how green you are? And then basically, can you get the decisions made? Do you have the data to make the decisions? Can you make the business case, or are you stuck? Are you ready to take green to the next level? I talked about the next generation where we can go, but even if you can just get the fundamentals in place, that's a big step forward. So in summary, we covered measure and manage, really looking at the data collection and how you might organize that and streamline that, and then put methods in place like performance management to really handle the managed part of it and measure the right information. Optimizing opportunities is a key area that we talked about. This is a lot about getting that green light and looking at what are the greener projects to pursue or where's the best value, and using methodologies such as portfolio project management. The integrated solutions is key, and looking at the future and how we can take it to the next level, and kind of the vision of high-performance workplace, intelligent buildings is the key to that, and leading practice and solutions. And so that is really kind of something to look to the future, or start on that. The results are there. I mean, you've seen a lot of these statistics in in various environmental sustainability studies. But basically, if we drive these green buildings, we can drive carbon emissions down, energy consumption costs down, water use. If we put the perspective of occupancy into, like I was saying, some of the statistics show that if we really adopt mobility programs as well as the building efficiency, we can drive down carbon emissions per person down substantially, and the space footprint down substantially. So we can get excellent results from this to drive the green performance, plan and prioritize the right projects, and deliver on a high-performance workplace. So at this point, I'm going to open it up to questions.
Yes, one moment, and I will unmute everybody. Okay, you all are unmuted, so you can certainly ask any questions, or you can ask questions in your chat.
Okay.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? Okay. I believe John Ringness had one. He was asking, does EPA collect any information from outside the U.S., or is it just all in the U.S.?
Josh, do you have any other questions that are coming up? I'm seeing one question. We get a copy of the presentation. Josh, Vanessa, you said there will be a recording available next week. Do you want to post the presentation as well? Josh or Vanessa, you hear me okay, or am I muted?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, now you can hear me. Sorry. Yes, we can post. You can email out the presentation, and the recording will be posted in about a week. John had a question though about the EPA that I don't think people heard the answer on. If they exclusively collect data for the U.S. or if they also collect information from abroad.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought maybe I was on mute, but basically, I don't have a good answer for that. I'm unsure on that. When we were applying this with some of the clients we had, they were looking at it from an international standpoint and still using that data, but I'm not positive whether you can get the breakdown, by countries outside the U.S. I believe you can, but I'm not positive on it.
Okay, and we also have a question. Do you have a rule of thumb for ROI target?
No, I don't. That is highly dependent on the corporation, and usually you can get with the finance group and kind of what are, and whether they use return on investment or net present value or internal rate of return, and really kind of get what are minimum thresholds that they have generally in practice, and or what are guidance of what range you need to be in order to get approved. I have not heard any particular rule of thumb. It just really varies by corporation, and it's usually the same rules applied across all projects, you know, whether they be facility management or others.
Okay, excellent. Before we wrap it up, just make sure there's no other questions. If you do, since we're having audio issues, if you could type them into the chat box. Otherwise, yes, again, the recording will be up in about a week, and we will email out the presentation. Bob, I thank you very much for a great presentation. You have a good one, okay?
All right, thank you all.
Bye-bye.